Nothing could match the ice in her stepmother's voice, not even the relentless, bitter Seattle rain that had been falling since the funeral. Shoved out of her childhood estate with nothing but a heavy rusted iron key to her name, Kara was absolutely certain her life was over. She couldn't have been more wrong. It was just beginning. The mahogany doors of the Queen Anne estate felt heavier than usual when Kara Harrington pushed them open. The house usually filled with the rich scent of cedarwood old books, and her father's booming laughter was now completely hollow. David Harrington, a renowned restorer of historic Pacific Northwest architecture, had died suddenly of a massive cardiac arrest just 3 days prior. He was 54, seemingly healthy, and the only family Kara had left in the world. Standing in the grand foyer, her black mourning dress still damp from the graveside service, Kara felt like a ghost haunting her own life. But she wasn't alone. Footsteps echoed from the top of the grand staircase. It was Evelyn. Evelyn Croft had married David 5 years ago. A former luxury real estate broker with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper tongue, Evelyn had seamlessly woven herself into David's life and finances. Kara had never trusted her, always sensing a calculating coldness beneath the designer cashmere and polite smiles. Her father, blinded by charm and loneliness after Kara's mother passed, had never seen it. "I see you're tracking mud onto the Persian rug." "Kara," Evelyn said, descending the stairs with a slow, deliberate grace. She was holding a manila folder, her eyes devoid of any grief. "We need to have a conversation. Now." Kara wiped her boots, her hands trembling. "Evelyn, please. We just buried him. Can we do this tomorrow?" "No, we cannot," Evelyn replied, gesturing toward the study. Waiting inside was Richard Hayes, an aggressive estate lawyer whom Kara had never seen before. He was not her father's usual attorney. Over the next 20 minutes, Kara's world was systematically dismantled. Richard, speaking in rapid, emotionless legalese, produced a document dated just 6 weeks prior. It was an amendment to David Harrington's will, pursuant to the revised trust. Richard droned on, pushing his glasses up his nose. The entirety of the Queen Anne estate, the liquid assets and the controlling shares of Harrington Restorations are left solely to Mrs. Evelyn Harrington. The previous provisions allocating the estate to you, Kara, have been fully revoked. Kara stared at the papers. The signature was messy, erratic, nothing like her father's precise, architect-trained handwriting. "This is a forgery," Kara whispered to the blood draining from her face. "My dad would never do this. He built this house for me and Mum. He told me just last month that my trust was fully secured." "The document is notarized and legally binding," Richard countered smoothly, snapping his briefcase shut. "If you wish to contest it, you may attempt to do so in probate court. However, given that you currently have 0 assets to fund a legal battle, I wouldn't advise it." Evelyn stood up, smoothing the skirt of her black Dior dress. "I'm going to need you out of the house by tonight, Kara. I have a staging company coming tomorrow. The market is hot, and I don't intend to keep this drafty old museum." "You're selling my childhood home," Kara's voice cracked. The sheer audacity of the betrayal paralyzed her. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That is no longer my concern," Evelyn said, walking over to a side table. She picked up a small, scuffed wooden cigar box and unceremoniously shoved it into Kara's chest. "Before your father passed, when he was in the ambulance, he kept rambling about his desk drawer. The paramedics gave this to me at the hospital. I assume it's the sentimental junk he wanted you to have. Take it, pack a single bag of your clothes, and leave." 2 hours later, Kara was standing on the wet pavement of a Seattle sidewalk, the heavy front door of her own home locked behind her. The rain soaked through her coat. She had a canvas duffel bag over her shoulder and the wooden cigar box clutched tightly in her hands. She walked for miles, the numbness in her legs matching the numbness in her mind. She eventually checked into the Starlight Motel, a decaying establishment off Aurora Avenue that smelled faintly of mildew and cheap bleach. Sitting on the edge of a sagging mattress, shivering under a thin polyester blanket, Kara finally allowed herself to cry. She wept for her father, for the theft of her home, and for the terrifying reality of being utterly alone. When the tears finally stopped, her eyes landed on the wooden cigar box sitting on the Formica nightstand. With trembling fingers, she unlatched the small brass clasp. The lid creaked open. Inside there were no letters, no hidden cash, no sentimental photographs. Resting on a bed of faded red velvet was a single, heavy iron key. It was massive, the kind of key that belonged to a medieval cathedral rather than a modern lock. It was covered in dark, reddish-brown flakes of rust. Kara picked it up. It felt impossibly heavy in her palm, cold and dense. "What is this, Dad?" she whispered to the empty room. She turned the key over in the dim light of the motel lamp. Near the bow of the key, partially obscured by a patch of rust, was a tiny, intricate engraving. She scratched away the corrosion with her thumbnail, revealing a small crest, a pine tree flanked by 2 griffins and 3 letters stamped deeply into the iron BOC. Beneath the letters, the number 7 was etched. Kara fell back onto the pillows, clutching the rusty key to her chest. Evelyn had stolen her past, but her father had left her a puzzle, and Kara Harrington, raised by a man who made a living uncovering the hidden histories of forgotten places, was never one to leave a mystery unsolved. The next morning, Kara woke up to the sound of sirens wailing down the avenue. She had exactly $42 in her checking account and a rusted piece of metal that might as well have been a paperweight. She took a quick lukewarm shower dressed in her most presentable slacks and a beige trench coat and caught a bus to the downtown Seattle Public Library. If BOC meant anything, she was going to find out. She spent 3 hours scouring local business registries, historical archives, and old architectural blueprints. She searched for Brotherhood of Carpenters, Board of Commerce, and a dozen other variations. Nothing matched the crest of the pine tree and griffins. Frustrated, Kara leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. Her father was old school. He didn't trust the cloud, he hated digital banking, and he kept his most important architectural schematics in fireproof physical safes. Banking. Kara sat up straight. She typed BOC Seattle Bank into the search engine. A single buried Wikipedia stub appeared. Bank of Cascadia. It was a highly exclusive private wealth management bank established in 1892, catering strictly to the region's oldest lumber and shipping families. They didn't advertise. They didn't have ATMs, and their corporate crest, an image of which, finally loaded on the slow library computer, was a pine tree flanked by 2 griffins. Kara grabbed her bag and bolted out of the library. The Bank of Cascadia was located in the basement level of a historic, nondescript stone building in the Pioneer Square district. There was no neon sign, only a small brass plaque next to heavy, bulletproof glass doors. Kara pushed her way inside, immediately feeling out of place. The lobby was a masterclass in Gilded Age opulence, Italian marble floors, dark mahogany teller's desks, and a hushed, reverent silence that made her wet boots squeak embarrassingly loud. A sharply dressed teller named Cynthia looked up from her computer monitor, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive assessment of Kara's damp coat and disheveled hair. "May I help you, miss? The public restrooms are at the coffee shop down the street," Cynthia said, her tone dripping with polite condescension. "I'm not here for the restroom," Kara said, standing taller. "I need to access a vault. Vault number 7. Cynthia's condescending smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. "I'm sorry, but our vault facilities are strictly for account holders, and frankly, we don't have a Vault 7 in our standard registry." I think you have the wrong institution." "I have the key," Kara insisted, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out the heavy, rusty iron key and placed it on the pristine marble counter with a loud, dull clank. Cynthia physically recoiled. "Please remove that from the counter. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." "Is there a problem here, Cynthia?" A deep, commanding voice interrupted. An older man dressed in a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit stepped out from a frosted glass office. He had a shock of white hair, sharp blue eyes, and a silver pocket watch chain draped across his vest. His name tag read, "Arturo Pendleton, Branch Manager." "No problem, Mr. Pendleton," Cynthia stammered. "This young woman was just leaving. She brought some sort of junk metal in here and is demanding access to a vault." Arturo Pendleton sighed, adjusting his glasses as he looked at Kara. "Miss, I apologize, but this is a private—" His voice died in his throat. His eyes had just landed on the rusty key sitting on the marble counter. All the color drained from Arturo's face. He moved forward slowly, as if approaching a live explosive, and leaned over the counter. He didn't touch the key, but his eyes traced the pine tree crest and the number 7. When he looked back up at Kara, his hands were visibly shaking. "What is your name?" Arturo asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Kara. Kara Harrington. David Harrington was my father." Arturo closed his eyes for a long moment, letting out a heavy, ragged breath. "David is gone, then?" "Yes," Kara said, a lump forming in her throat. "3 days ago, Cynthia," Arturo said, his voice suddenly snapping with absolute authority. "Lock the front doors. Put the branch on a temporary blackout hold. No one comes in." "But sir, it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday." "Do it." Arturo barked a ferocity in him that made the teller scramble for the security lockdown button. Arturo turned to Kara, his expression a mix of deep sorrow and profound anxiety. "Grab the key, Miss Harrington, and come with me. We have a lot of stairs to climb down." Kara snatched the key from the counter and followed the bank manager through a discreet wooden door behind the teller line. They entered a narrow, dimly lit concrete stairwell that spiraled downward into the earth. The air grew colder and smelled of damp stone and old oil. "My father," Kara started, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You knew him." "I knew him very well," Arturo replied, not looking back as he descended. "David wasn't just a client, Kara. He was a guardian. The Bank of Cascadia isn't just a place to store money. The founders of this city, the lumber barons, the railroad tycoons, they acquired things they didn't want the government or the public to ever see." They reached a landing. Before them stood a massive modern titanium door equipped with a retinal scanner and a digital keypad. Your father's restoration company was a perfect cover. Arturo continued typing in a lengthy passcode. When he was hired to retrofit these historic buildings, he was actually maintaining the structural integrity of the subterranean vaults beneath the city. He built the modern security systems that protect the old ones. The titanium door hissed and swung open heavily. Kara stepped through and gasped. They were standing in a massive, cavernous underground chamber. It looked like a cross between a Victorian subway station and a medieval fortress. Lined along the curved brick walls were massive iron-wrought vault doors, each the size of a small car. Arturo walked past Vault 1, Vault 2, leading her deep into the echoing darkness. "Evelyn thinks she won," Arturo said quietly as they walked. "Your stepmother came in here yesterday, you know, waving that forged will around, demanding access to your father's accounts." Kara stopped. "She was here. Did you give her his money?" Arturo scoffed a dry, humorless sound. "David transferred every liquid asset he had out of standard banking a year ago. the moment he realized Evelyn was slowly poisoning his morning coffee. Kara felt the floor drop out from beneath her. Poisoning my dad died of a heart attack, induced by a gradual build-up of a highly untraceable digitalis compound, if his suspicions were correct, Arturo said grimly. He couldn't prove it yet. He needed more time to gather the evidence without tipping her off, but he knew his heart was failing. So he secured his true legacy, where she could never ever reach it. They finally stopped at the very end of the tunnel. Before them was a door unlike the others. It wasn't shiny titanium or polished steel. It was made of blackened, riveted iron, scarred by time. In the center of the massive door was a single ancient keyhole. Above the door, cast in iron, was the number 7. Vault 7, Arturo said softly. It requires no digital passcode, no retinal scan. It operates entirely on a custom-built, purely mechanical tumbler system designed by your father. It is immune to EMPs, hacking, and power failures. And there is only one key in existence. He looked at the rusty piece of metal in Kara's hand. Why is the key so rusty? Kara asked, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Because he hid it inside the water tank of the toilet in his study. Arturo replied, a faint smile touching his lips. He knew Evelyn was too refined, too much of a snob to ever look in the plumbing. He knew she would just toss the junk out. Arturo stepped back, gesturing to the iron door. I must warn you, Kara, Arturo said, his tone turning deadly serious. Once you put that key in the lock, your life as you know it is over. Evelyn is a dangerous woman with dangerous friends. What is inside this vault will give you the power to destroy her, but it will also put a target on your back. Kara looked at the massive iron door. She thought about her father dying alone, betrayed by a woman he brought into their home. She thought about being thrown out into the rain with nothing but a canvas bag. The fear that had been gripping her chest for the last 3 days suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, searing anger. Good, Kara said. She stepped forward, raised the heavy iron key, and slid it into the lock of Vault 7. The sound of the mechanism was agonizingly slow, a heavy grinding thud of iron tumblers shifting against each other, echoing through the cold subterranean air. Kara held her breath, her knuckles white as she turned the key. With a final resonating clack that seemed to vibrate through the soles of her boots, the massive door groaned. It didn't swing outward. It slid silently into the wall, revealing a space that was not a vault in the traditional sense. It was a sanctuary. Kara stepped inside, her eyes wide. The room was illuminated by a soft amber glow coming from hidden LED strips, modern technology, integrated into antique surroundings. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling mahogany filing cabinets, but the centerpiece of the room was a massive glass-topped drafting table. Spread across the table was not money or gold, but documents, blueprints of the city's most iconic skyscrapers, photographs of historical landmarks, and most chillingly, a thick dossier with the name Evelyn Croft embossed in bold black ink. I'll leave you to it, Kara, Arturo said from the threshold, his voice tight. The security protocols of this vault trigger an alert to my private office if someone unauthorized tries to breach it. You are safe here for as long as you need. But be careful what you read. Some truths are meant to stay buried. He retreated, and the heavy door slid shut, leaving Kara in the silence of her father's secret life. She moved to the drafting table. The dossier on Evelyn was a roadmap of destruction. It contained bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, dated back 3 years long before Evelyn had even met David. There were copies of medical reports documenting the slow-acting toxin Arturo had mentioned, signed by a shell company masquerading as a diagnostic lab. But as Kara flipped through the pages, She realized the motive wasn't just wealth, it was land. Attached to the financial records were land deeds for the very property her childhood home sat on. It turned out the Queen Anne estate was the anchor point for a massive multi-million-dollar redevelopment project Evelyn had been secretly planning with a conglomerate called Apex Dynamics. If Evelyn could force the sale of the estate, she would clear the path for a skyscraper that would destroy the historic integrity of the entire neighborhood. Her father hadn't just been a restorer, he had been the primary obstacle to a corporate takeover of the city's heritage. Kara felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of clarity. She wasn't just fighting for her inheritance, she was fighting to stop the erasure of the city's history and her father's life work. Buried under the dossier was a small, leather-bound notebook. She opened it. It was her father's journal. To whoever holds the key to Vault 7, you are either my daughter Kara or someone who has destroyed me. If you are Kara, know that I am sorry for the silence. I lived in fear that if I spoke the truth, she would have come for you sooner. The key is your armor. The contents of this room are your sword. Use them to rebuild what she has tried to shatter. Kara began to sort through the files. She found a digital drive labeled Master Override. It was an encrypted key that gave the user administrative control over the Harrington Restoration server. She plugged it into a hidden port on the drafting table. A hologram projector hummed to life, displaying a 3D architectural model of the Queen Anne estate. Suddenly, a red blinking icon appeared in the center of the structure. It was an unauthorized digital entry point, active right now. Kara leaned in. Evelyn wasn't just selling the house. She was actively gutting the digital archive of every building David had ever restored. She was deleting the provenance, the history, the very soul of the structures, essentially making them legally obsolete so they could be demolished without the protections of landmark status. Kara's hands flew over the holographic interface. With a few commands, she didn't just lock Evelyn out. She triggered an automated forensic audit that would broadcast a red flag to the City Planning Commission and the Historical Society. Every deletion Evelyn made was being logged, time-stamped, and sent directly to the authorities as proof of willful destruction of historic property. "Checkmate," Kara whispered. 2 weeks had passed, and the tension in the city was palpable. The news of the Harrington estate scandal had broken not through a whisper, but through an avalanche of leaked documents that had somehow made their way to every major news outlet in Seattle. The Queen Anne estate was currently under a city-mandated freeze. Evelyn Croft was under investigation for fraud, corporate espionage, and more quietly, the suspicious death of her husband. But Evelyn was not the type to go down without a final desperate gambit. The annual Architectural Heritage Gala was the most exclusive event of the year, held at the opulent, glass-domed conservatory downtown. Evelyn, still clinging to the remnants of her social standing, had decided to make an appearance, hoping to charm her way out of the storm by announcing a charitable donation to the city's development fund, funded by the very money she had embezzled. Kara stood in the shadows of the mezzanine, wearing a simple dark blue gown that had belonged to her mother. She didn't look like a grieving, evicted daughter anymore. She looked like a woman with a mission. She watched as Evelyn glided through the crowd, her smile as practiced as ever, though her eyes were darting around, paranoid and sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event host announced, his voice echoing through the grand hall. "We are honored to have Mrs. Evelyn Harrington with us tonight, who has a special announcement regarding the future of our city's skyline." Evelyn stepped onto the stage, the spotlight catching the diamonds around her neck. "It is my deepest honor to donate $10 million to the expansion of our downtown district, ensuring that our city grows toward a brighter, more efficient future." A smattering of applause broke out, but it was thin, hesitant. Kara stepped out from the shadows and began to walk toward the stage. The crowd parted, sensing the shift in the room's energy. "That money isn't yours to donate, Evelyn." Kara's voice cut through the room, amplified by the hall's acoustics. The room went deathly silent. Evelyn froze her hand, still holding the microphone. She turned her face, contorting with rage. "Kara, I should have expected you to show up and cause a scene. Security remove this woman." Two large men in black suits stepped forward, but they were stopped by the arrival of Arturo Pendleton, who strode into the hall with two city detectives behind him. "Actually," Arturo said, his voice booming, "security will stay right where they are. Detective Miller, would you mind showing Mrs. Harrington what we found on the servers today?" The detective stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Mrs. Harrington, you are under arrest for the forgery of David Harrington's will, embezzlement of over $40 million from Harrington Restorations, and we are currently opening an investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding David Harrington's death." Evelyn's face turned a ghostly shade of white. The microphone slipped from her hand, hitting the stage floor with a loud, jarring thud. "This is a setup, that girl. She's a fraud. She has no right to any of this." Kara walked up the stage stairs, meeting Evelyn eye to eye. "You threw me out with a piece of junk, Evelyn. You didn't realize that in this city, even the smallest, rustiest key can unlock the truth." As the police led Evelyn away in handcuffs, the room erupted into a chaos of cameras and whispers. Kara didn't watch her go. She looked out at the crowd, at the people who had stood by while her family's legacy was being sold off. The journey from the cold rain of the Seattle streets to this stage had been a trial by fire. She had lost her father, her home, and her innocence. But standing there with the weight of the secret vault and the truth of her father's love finally settled, she knew she had found something more valuable than any estate. She had found her own strength. Kara Harrington was no longer just the daughter of an architect. She was the guardian of the city's soul, and as the morning light began to filter through the glass dome of the conservatory, she knew that for the first time in her life, the future was entirely her own to design. The truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. Kara's story is a testament to the power of resilience and the enduring legacy of family. If you were gripped by the mystery of Vault 7 and the fight for justice, make sure to like this video to help others find it. Share the story with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always wins, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life dramas.